Okay, now just a few comments about Chapter 2. You did a worksheet that took you up, again, maybe the first half, and it stopped at the point where it talked about research design, experiments, and things. We're not going to do anything with that part right now. We may come back to it later if we get time to do something on applied behavior analysis, which I hope we do this summer. But just to point out, a lot of the learning data do come from rats and pigeons. And these are different from a lot of what you're probably used to in psychological research, where we have lots of, we get a lot of people and we split them up into groups, and we maybe do something to one group and then we measure a dependent variable. What often happens in learning research is called single subject design. That means one. So you have one rat, let's say, and what you do is you run that rat through different kinds of perhaps schedules of reinforcement. And you're comparing the rat's behavior in these different conditions. So it's actually similar to what you might know as a repeated measures or within groups design, when the same people serve in every condition of the independent variable. So you could think of every condition, the things that the rats are doing, almost like levels of an independent variable, or they start off and they're naive on a certain schedule, and as they get more practice, their behavior takes on a pattern. Now, between the conditions, if we're comparing their behavior under different conditions, the dependent variables, their behavior, which might be, a number of times they press a lever, or how quickly, or the pattern of lever pressing, or if they're in a maze, do they turn left or right? How many mistakes do they make as they go through? And their errors, the number of wrong turns decreases as they learn. So each animal is like one study. And the beautiful part of it is there's no statistics. Oh, you just graph the data, or you just look at the number. Oh, it's wonderful. Now, if I don't publish a paper on one rat. I might run, 2, 3, like 4 rats through the similar conditions, but every animal is like a replication of my experiment. So it is a different take. And again, this will really come back more if, and I hope if, when we get to talking about applying operant conditioning to human behavior as treatment. This is usually used like kids maybe that are kind of severe on the autism spectrum, or they're nonverbal or whatever. And so we'll come back to this material when we need it. Now, at the end of Chapter 2, there is something on ethics for animals. And we're using all these animals in research, so we got to be concerned with, how are we taking care of them? And your book gives a little information it's worth looking at. And I'll just mention what we have to protect animals. Well, there's the Animal Welfare Act. And then specifically, we have something called the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. It's IACUC, which we pronounce IACUC. Now, an IACUC is exactly like an institutional review board, an IRB, which you may have heard for human subjects. And IRBs and IACUCs do the same kind of thing. What they are is they're committees that any institution that gets any kind of federal funding has to have if they do human research or animal research. And then there, of course, institutions that don't have this kind of funding still have this because it's best practices, and it basically keeps you from getting sued. But the IACUC has to look at any research somebody wants to do at that institution with the animals. They have to submit proposals. And the committee reviews it and makes sure, well, you're not using too many animals. If it's, is there going to be any pain and suffering? What are you going to do about that? Are the animals going to be killed at the end? Do you have to do this procedure to answer your scientific question? Are there any alternatives? Are you replicating something someone already did and this is a waste? How are you caring for the animals? There's just basically lots of red tape. And the animal labs and care facilities have to meet very high standards of how they run themselves. And so they get inspected by the USDA. All the stuff goes in. And so there's a lot of protections around animals in research. And I'd certainly be happy to talk to you more about it if you have questions about like what kind of standards they have to meet and that sort of thing. So do take a look at that in Chapter 2. And that should pretty much do it. You'll have a quiz, again, on this material that you can take and make sure you're feeling really up to speed on it, everything.